Hello, I'm Anthony Tierno, author of Maldene. This time I'm doing a video blog just for fun. A number of years ago I had a question in my head, a rather strange one, of what if Santa Claus was a visiting alien from another planet? Finally I wrote a little short story. It's only about 4 pages long, and I wrote it up in 1988, and it's been squirreled away in my archives ever since. So for just today, for the holiday season, I thought I'd bring a little bit of different cheer by reading out the entirety of The Man in the Red Suit. Like I said, it's a really short story and kind of unusual. So, without further ado, The Man in the Red Suit by Anthony Tierno. The air was still and magical as Billy and Lisa crept down the staircase and peeked into the living room, still hung with a bit of mist. Billy gasped as Lisa dropped her dolly with a squeal. They both bolted towards the tree, heaped with presents and trimmings. Billy gazed wistfully out through the window, trying to find the Christmas deliverer of such marvelous happiness. The jolly fat man in the red suit sighed and sat back in his seat. He fingered the autopilot switch and settled back for the ride home. Last stop, he muttered to himself as he gazed at clouds and countryside speeding by faster than sound. He looked at the reindeer pulling him aloft. That's R period, I period, no, R period, E period, I period, N period, D period, E period, E period, R period. I know the story. He looked at the reindeer pulling him aloft. Such a quaint acronym, he thought to himself, to stand for Remotely Energized Integrated Night Directional Electronically Enhanced Robots, although he still looked upon them as actual pets. He'd even named them after a song he'd heard, including the spare that he sometimes used, the one of the IR light for flying in low visibility. The grav sled finally sloped down to the North Pole base. Chris noticed the ship parked on the landing pad and wondered if it was another inspector come to poke around again. It seemed like only 50 years since the last one came round. The elves helped him down off the sled and then proceeded to busy themselves at seeing to the deer and the sled, an old Mark II grav sled. He thought about the elves. He still wondered about the intense work ethic that all natives of the planet Elfos seemed to have, and wondered if they ever took a vacation at all. As he entered the doors to the personal area of the station, his subordinate secretary, advisor, confidant, and sometimes lover, approached him with a forced smile on her lips as she took his big environ coat and let him in. In the parlor, in one of the plush antique chairs, sat a skinny, stiff-lipped business suit pretending to be a man. As Chris entered, the polyester person got up, sniffed stiffly, and then stepped over to him. "My credentials," the business suit said tightly, handing over his CompuDisc. "I am a first-class inspector from Central Lifeform and Universal Services." You could hear the capitals as he talked. "Yes," he responded, turning the disc over in his fingers as he also reached for his pipe in his pocket. "We haven't had a visitor from Klaus headquarters in quite a few years. You are Dr. Kringle?" "Just Chris," as he lit up his pipe. "Well, I am here to look over your research station on this planet. We've had some strange reports about your operations. Like, for instance, why aren't you on Rejuve? You look quite old and degenerated. Unlike your pretty little subordinate here," pointing to the lady present. "It helps me to blend in with the natives this time of year. Usually I am on Rejuve. And by the way, I didn't quite catch your name. Mr. Trollkin," emphasizing the Mr. "Now please show me around this base." Chris sighed and let him out the door. "And this is where the toys are manufactured," she said. "The design is entered into that terminal over there, the quantity selected, and then the matter energy fabricators create them, and the elves ship them off to storage." "Yes, I understand all that," the inspector rapped impatiently, "but why is all this necessary? You're just supposed to observe their culture, not get involved in it." "Each of the toys has an environmental monitor with a 5-year lifespan. Our computers in the elves monitor receive data all year round," Chris replied. "Yes, I realize that, but I don't see why so many are needed, nor why all this propensity for commercialization is required. Why they even know of you publicly. What kind of non-involved scientific study do you call that? The only way that these natives can be studied is from the inside. Surely you can't just expect us to. I expect to see proper observance of scientific protocol, not this prepubescent emotional claptrap from an old quack in a red jumpsuit. "You shall not talk to my husband like that," she yelled back. "Your husband?" "Yes, we got married in accordance with the local," Chris began. "So, now you're actually becoming one of the locals. It's not enough that Mr. Trollkin," Chris began firmly. "We have sent back quite a lot of valuable data for Klaus. What we do in our... Would you like to get on with the inspection?" he finished more calmly. "I've seen quite enough." He paced over to the door, then stopped. "I'm recommending that the so-called scientific outpost be closed indefinitely." The loud slamming door amplified the silence impressed upon the room. "What are we going to do, Chris?" she asked her husband while in the kitchen. "I'm not sure," he said calmly between sips of his tea. A quaint native beverage, he thought. "You know I don't plot too well while not in rejuve." "I'm sorry." She sat down beside him. "It's just that I'm so worried." "Well," he patted her hand, "I'll just have to take care of him and Klaus for good." Her eyes widened. What are these called that I'm eating?" the inspector asked. "They're Christmas cookies," she responded diffidently. "Those are chocolate chip." Quaint. "Well, when I make my report, your husband, is it, will get a negligence and interference hearing. But you might be reassigned. I might be able to..." "Please don't." She faced her back towards him. "If you display any more of these odd emotional attachments, you may have to go through a competence hearing yourself," he pointed out, "and possibly even a mind readjust as well." Just at that time, Chris walked in, smile on his lips, around his lit pipe, red cap and bulky furry red suit on, looking for all the world like a poster boy for Christmas seals. "Aha! You come in displaying flagrant violations of at least a dozen different codes. You've had it now, and insanity please won't help either." A merry twinkle left his left eye, and he calmly walked up, puffed twice in his pipe, and said, "There's something I want to show you, if you would be so kind." The inspector was about to unleash some hard, efficient expletive, but then stopped short and said, "Sure. Let's see some more of your pandering violations. You can hang yourself." Chris led him out across the compound and into a computer-filled room, ablaze with 3D display screens, and nearly an elf to be seen amongst them. He sat in front of one of them, pressed a few studs, and popped up a display of a boy and a girl playing with some newly opened toys. He snorted. "You expect me to be overcome by a poor display of pseudo-sentimentalism for a couple of animals? Just observe." As they did so, arguing was heard in the background, of matters of money and schools for the kids. The parents then entered the room, eyes ablaze with fury at each other. Then their eyes lit upon the two playing with their toys, and softened in mid-gaze. The parents began to then play with their children. So what? We already found out the relationship with their offspring. Oh? What would that have been in the fiascoed Hamlin incident? He smiled. Project Piper was the solid prospect too, but it ended in disaster. No, such overt techniques are no good. Here you will observe that the toys are the center of a child's life. But children are the center of a parent's life, and indeed of most other adults' lives. Where negotiation fails, put in a questioning child and watch both sides try reaching an agreement. Why, just put an old toy in front of an adult with no one else present, and watch him soften with memories of his childhood. The sentimentalism can be a powerful tool of psychological warfare, and toys are a way of tapping into its potential. "Well, I've sure observed its effects on you," he snorted sarcastically, but then his eyes drifted over to the image again. He watched as the children and parents played, the presence of the children at play having diffused the fight, the parents even sneaking an occasional kiss when they thought the kids weren't looking. And then, when the kids had walked off to breakfast, the parents found themselves still playing with the toys, and each other. Inspector suddenly shook himself, having found himself caught up in the scene, and then clicked off the viewer and got up. Well, there just might be something to this technique after all. It could be quite a powerful tool, Chris suggested. Yes, well, I'll suggest to Klaus headquarters that your project get a higher priority. I'll be glad to send off a few sample toys to HQ, so you can then test them there, say with some of our own kids, to observe the effects upon children of a superior race naturally. Naturally. But don't hold out too much hope. After all, our kids aren't like these native animals, you know. Of course not, he smiled good-naturedly. But we could plant a few sample tests in some solar systems we've been having trouble with. I'll be glad to supply the toys and such. Tell you what, since you seem to have acquired a certain amount of resistance to this type of warfare, You can make the deliveries and be put in charge of the entire project. Why, thank you, Inspector Trollkin. I gladly accept your gracious offer. Well, I have to get going back to HQ to make a report. I'll take 2 of these toys back with me. Very well, smiled Chris as he began reaching for a doll on the table. Dr. Kringle, could I take one of those red fire engines, too? He pointed, a bit nervous and preoccupied. Why, of course, he chuckled. Here. The inspector was then showed out to his ship, last seen trying to finger the miniature fire hose without being seen. When Chris walked, smiling and puffing on his pipe, back into the house, his wife greeted him with a happy but concerned look. Chris, are you sure it was wise to do it that way? Well, I didn't like to build the toys as some weapon of warfare to be used, but I think that will work out. But what if he hadn't gone for it so easily, dear? Chris opened his large, bulky red coat, reached into an inner pocket concealed in its large folds, and brought out a small cigarette-sized case, Amiability Field Generator, model number AF25, and put it down on the table and smiled. Everyone's always friendly around old Santa, he chuckled. She smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder, while he chuckled like a bowlful of, well, you know. He then put an arm around her and said, Come, honey, what with the new expanded routes come next Christmas, I'd better get to read you right now. So, if you look up in the sky one Christmas night and see a jolly fat man wearing a red environ suit in a grab sled pulled by 8 reindeer, the acronym, that just happen to resemble certain animal natives of a Class C world, then you may not necessarily be on Earth. For Christmas and good old Santa has spread to the stars, leaving the sometimes old jolly elf a quite busy schedule delivering all of those toys, implements of psychological warfare. Happy holidays.